So, in 1979, we discovered that in space no one can hear you scream, as Ridley Scott's sci-fi horror masterpiece, Alien, was unleashed on a world that was really still seeing sci-fi as being a family-friendly thing after the immense success of Star Wars. And obviously more of that was to come, but this extra level of sci-fi was also coming up as well. Horror sci-fi, I guess you could call it. In 2003, so we're talking 24 years after the original release, there was a DVD box set released, as the box set was coming to the fore as the way to distribute these films and celebrate these series. And the Alien quadrilogy came with special editions of most of the 4 films, I think, including the director's cut of Alien. But it's sort of a point open for debate as to whether it's a proper director's cut, because in the introduction to it, in fact, Ridley Scott himself says that the 1979 original was as near to perfect as it was possible to make, so he then recut it because they wanted a director's cut, but whether the director's cut is really the director's cut or the original is sort of open for debate, and both sort of, I think he says both kind of sit on a par really, but they're slightly different, but only very slightly really from what I can recall. I haven't seen the original version in a few years. I've watched the director's cut a couple of times more recently, but they're quite similar, and from the start of them really you're plunged into this sort of this grimy low-tech industrial sci-fi world, and it sort of instantly says this isn't the sort of operatic romp, space opera romp that things like Star Wars and to an extent the sort of Star Trek movies as well are. And as the camera glides round these sort of empty corridors with slightly grungy looking set decoration and clearly a lived in place, there's this sense of foreboding, I guess you'd call it, instantly sort of transmitted across to the audience through the screen and through the speakers as well, because the music and sound effects in the film work brilliantly with everything else to make it all come together. And this sense of foreboding is something that never really stops during the first act of the film. It just keeps going and going and building really until what happens starts to happen. And there's a real sense that the film, I mean, most films, mainstream films, are divided into 3. You've got the 3-act structure and all of that, but Alien kind of takes each act, they're very separate things, and the first one feels like it's sort of exploration. It is that sort of Star Trek thing of boldly going and looking for things, but with this overarching sense of foreboding, and that's when the crew wake up. We discover the world they live in. They discover this planetoid and this massive spaceship and the space jockey and the eggs and that sort of thing. And then while they're discovering the eggs, obviously things change as the facehugger appears. Sorry for spoilers for anyone who's not seen Alien, but really? You've not seen Alien? Wow. Watch it now. Don't watch me, watch the film. And yeah, so the facehugger attaches itself to John Hurt, and suddenly, there we are, we're in the next sort of film, really, which becomes, I guess, once the xenomorph, the alien, is born, in one of the still most brilliantly surprising, but even if you know it's coming, it's still a wow, that's well done moment of the creature being born. And it then becomes this slasher style film, almost a monster movie of the crew being picked off one by one in that kind of way that happens in what became teen slasher movies in the 80s and late 70s, but the sort of slasher film feeling, the monster movie feeling as well, to a point. And then towards the end it just becomes this proper haunted house kind of thing where you know there's something out there. There's one heroine and the cat, but there's the heroine left against the alien, and it grows from there. And I mean, in the the 2003 director's cut, there's also the addition, which adds to the haunted house vibe, I think, of the discovery that Ripley, Sigourney Weaver's character, makes when she's trying to escape from the ship, as she finds the, well, not quite the remains, but the soon-to-be remains of Dallas and Brett sort of stuck up on the walls, in a sort of foreboding of what we saw in Aliens and Alien 3 and Resurrection and thereafter. But I think that was a scene that's specific to the director's cut, and actually sets Ripley up as being a much more hardcore, for want of a better word, much more sort of serious heroine character even than she was before. And here she was a pretty serious heroine character in the original version. But this structure in the hands of someone a little, I don't know, in the hands of someone other than someone like Ridley Scott, I guess, could fall apart a bit, but it's all stuck together really well. It all flows brilliantly, and you don't feel like there's this sudden change in style. It just grows, and the design obviously really ties it all together as well, because from the start it feels like a sort of haunted house thing, but not highlighted, but then that becomes highlighted, and all of that. And also, two of the acting performances really stand out to me as overarching the whole thing and pulling it all together. Sigourney Weaver is probably the most obvious as Warrant Officer Ripley, Ellen Ripley, I believe. And she just delivers a fantastic performance, particularly in the second and third acts of the film, as she sort of starts off as just one of the crew, really, but then by the end she's grown into this matriarchal figure almost, this powerful female character who saves the day as best the day can be saved by not letting the alien get back to Earth, as she's seen what it can do. And sort of, I guess it fits that she replaces almost Mother, the ship's computer, as the person in charge and the person controlling it. She becomes the mother, she becomes the matriarchal figure in it, even rescuing the cat. And the other great performance, which it's taken me a while to really twig as being as good as it is Ian Holm as Ash. And I mean, obviously he's a main character in it, he's one of the main plot devices towards the end, but watching it again this time, I really, really noticed quite how there is something other about him throughout the whole film. And obviously that's revealed later on, but he starts off a little bit Mr. Spock. He's the science officer, and he quotes the rules and regulations of the company, and all of this. But as it goes on, we find out that he's slightly more than just quoting the rules and regulations of the company, and he is in fact there to serve the company and their directives no matter what. And that is is the main reason, I think, why what happens in the film ends up happening. And yeah, and I guess it's sort of a moment of this sort of allegory of big business and how it's not necessarily a good thing that seemingly the entire world is run by the company, which is the Weyland-Yutani company, as it turns out to be named later on. Yeah, so it's as well as being a horror movie with some great horror stuff going on and some great sci-fi, it's got that sort of undercurrent to it as well. And I mean, in the end, whichever version of the film of Alien that you end up watching, they're both great. As I was saying earlier, Ridley Scott has said both the original is as good as it could be, but the second one is really good as well. And I mean, I've seen it probably 10 times at least now, and it's still sort of enthralling and still actually sort of scary. It still works its way in and gets to me when I watch it.